even into and through the month of November. In terms of precipitation, more of a mixed bag there. Some areas in the northern plains and upper Midwest where it was unusually wet, but there were also some areas from Kentucky across Missouri and Kansas that were below average in terms of precipitation. And then again, other folks kind of in between there. So nothing that stands out so much for the month in terms of precipitation. But if we look back over the 90-day period, or three months of the fall season, it was just a remarkably warm fall. And again, really throughout the entire country, but the region of interest here in the north central region, it was either the warmest fall or the second warmest fall for everyone, every state within the region. And again, a remarkable fall. The precipitation patterns, again, similar to what we saw on the last map. The dryness in Kentucky kind of extending upward from the drought conditions that you see in the southeast. So we had the dryness there, but it's also remarkable when you look there at Kentucky, the sixth driest, and yet as soon as you cross the Ohio River, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio were right there in the middle. There was no real sense of dryness, a very sharp gradient or boundary in terms of those dry conditions. And then the upper Midwest, as we'll see, very wet throughout that region. And so some areas between there that were close to normal, so a pretty typical year. Now we've got some maps that highlight these things a little bit more, and I put three of them on one page so that you could kind of go back and compare a little bit. But in the upper left, you see temperature departures for the past 30 days, November 16th through December 13th. And again, most of the area in gray was right around normal in terms of temperature for the entire period. I think most of us kind of realized that, while that was the average, we kind of shifted from that warm mode into a much colder mode. And so it's really something of a bimodal distribution of temperatures through over time, and it averaged out to be about normal. Portions of the upper Midwest, Great Lakes areas, a little bit warmer than other areas relative to mean, while areas farther west were a little bit cooler in the region. If you look in the upper right, you see the past 90 days in terms of temperature, and most of the region, again, consistent with what we saw in the previous slides, about 3 to 5 degrees above normal for most of the region, and just a remarkably warm fall period. And in the lower right, looking year to date, about somewhere between 1 and 4 degrees above normal for the year. And of course, we're almost done with that, so that's not going to change too much at this point. Moving on to precipitation, in the upper left, the past 30 days of precipitation, above normal again in the upper plains and Midwest, some drier areas to the south, particularly in much of Missouri and into Kansas. Started to see some improvement elsewhere in Kentucky, and so this gradient of drier south, wetter north shows up there again. The last 90 days, you see similar pattern overall in terms of the dryness, and you'll note that some areas there in western Kansas receiving less than 25, in some cases less than 10% of normal precipitation. Farther east, anywhere from 25 to 75% of normal precipitation for that period. And again, wetter conditions as you go farther north. And then in the bottom right, year-to-date precipitation as a percent of mean precipitation, and much of the region is in the 75 to 100%. So relatively close to normal or a bit above normal. In some areas farther to north in Montana, North Dakota, well above normal in terms of percent of mean precipitation. And of course, those means in those areas are not as high as what you would find as you move farther eastward and southward in the region. As a result of all that, we had some records set this year, and had some communication from our state climate office in Minnesota, where they set a new statewide record already with a few days left here in December for the most precipitation across the state, 54.96 inches, breaking the old record of 53.52. And likewise, information provided through the State Climate Office of Iowa. We have a number of records set in the northern half of the state in terms of precipitation. Again, as you come to the south and east, it's a different situation in terms of a little more dryness. But again, remarkably wet in significant portions of the north central region. The next set of maps shows soil moisture anomalies on the left, and a percentile ranking on the right side to provide a little bit of a different perspective, a little more context for that. You can see the areas in the browns and orange colors where soil moisture deficits are evident. And again, drought conditions were quite pervasive in Kentucky. And again, remarkably, because we had a record wet conditions during the summer. So that was a quick change. Ohio, again, not considered in part of our region, but some dryness throughout Ohio, although drought was not as big of an issue. Some dryness through Missouri and southeastern part of Iowa, a little bit of Illinois, and otherwise just some patchy dryness, but nothing major. And then quite a bit of area also that's a bit above normal in terms of soil moisture. So all in all, soil moisture is close to where we would expect it to be this time of year. And again, the percentiles really show the same qualitative story in terms of some areas that are remarkably wet, other areas that are remarkably dry, and much of the region that is about where you would expect at this time of year. The next map shows soil temperatures across the region at 4-inch depth under sod. This graphic, I think Jim Angel from Illinois State Climatologist included this last month, and this is a newer product to go in here. It's a product of our collaboration among mesonet operators throughout the region, and I'm hopeful that as time goes on, you will all find more and more products of this type that reflect data being assimilated from different mesonets across the region. So there you can see soil temperatures farther north. Certainly we've got frost in the soil starting to go down a few inches now with what one might expect, and warmer soil conditions as you move to the south and east, where soil temperatures are in some cases still well into the 40s. Okay. The next map shows snow depth in the upper left across the region. Again, warm fall. The snow has finally arrived. It was a bit late arriving this year, but it's here. And you can see some accumulation that's happened over the last week to 2 weeks, particularly across the northern tier of states, and starting to build that snowpack out in the western states. On the bottom right, you see those snow depths as departures from normal. So the blue shades are areas that are a bit above normal in terms of snow depth for this time of year. And again, North Dakota standing out after a significant snow event there recently. And then as you go farther south, again, we haven't seen that snow cover develop quite as much as we might expect up to this time. But we're early in the season, and departures are not major there. This graph, a set of graphs, and the next show mountain snowpack water content at 2 locations in the Missouri Basin above Fort Peck and from Fort Peck to Garrison. Several lines on the graph. The red trajectory there from October shows the normal progression of snowpack water content, and then you have extreme dry year of 2001, and the accumulation so far this year. You'll note that in both cases, in both graphs, again, the warm fall, the snow season was delayed. We were falling behind at a record lack of snow, but that's been changing recently, and while we're still behind the curve, we're picking up, and the rate of ascent on that curve is encouraging, that we may be moving in the direction where we'd like to be at this time of year. And again, the key thing is we're still very early in the season. Here's a similar set of graphs for the Platte River Basin. And this one not quite as busy in terms of the number of trajectories shown there. Just shows the current versus the average or normal for 1981 to 2010. And again, the delayed onset, but things are picking up nicely and headed in the right direction. Stream flow conditions across the region, again reflecting the ample precipitation that has fallen in the upper Midwest and a portion of the Great Plains. And as you move farther south and east, stream flows are mainly in that 25th to 75th percentile, kind of about where we would expect them to be this year. But as you get into Ohio, Kentucky, you start to see a little bit more of the browns and reds, so forth, showing up. Those stream flows are rebounding, though, with recent precipitation. So things are starting to get better in that region. As you move farther south, you see areas where the drought in the southeast is still quite evident, and likewise in the northeastern U.S. in terms of stream flows. Moving on to the Great Lakes, a graph showing temperatures on the Great Lakes. Currently as high as about 50 degrees in some areas, and then down into the 40s and 30s. On the right, ice concentration. Again, at this point, after a very warm fall, water temperatures have been above normal on the lakes, and there's been very limited ice accumulation, but that is starting to change, and we anticipate that will continue to build as we go forward here, and the weather pattern has shifted a bit for us. The National Drought Monitor, U.S. Drought Monitor graphic came out here just today, and you can see a continuation of what we've seen for a few months now in terms of the exceptional drought conditions in the southeast. Still severe drought in Kentucky, but that is waning, and anticipate that that is likely to be downgraded going forward. Otherwise, throughout the region, with the exception of a portion of western South Dakota and some areas in Wyoming where it has been dry and becoming increasingly dry with drought conditions developing, for the most part, the region is not dealing with drought concerns. And if there is a bit of dryness, as you see in parts of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, again, it's not a time of the year where that's a major concern, at least at this point. The next map shows change over the last month in terms of drought categories on the drought monitor. The yellow shows a degradation of one class in terms of a bit of increasing dryness, The green showing a one-class improvement, and the grays showing areas that were in drought that continue to be at the same level according to the U.S. Drought Monitor. So again, no major changes within the region, and given the time of year, we would not expect significant changes going forward. So even if it's dry, much of the region, as we get into the upper Midwest and plains, it's a time of the year when we don't expect a lot of precipitation anyway. So it would be difficult for the situation to be degraded too much there. And even if we were to be dry, and it's not in the outlook, water demand is low, and not just in agriculture, but in other sectors. So we would not anticipate significant drought impacts developing through the winter season. Okay. Having said that, here in Kentucky, again, we had actually a rather remarkable scenario this summer as we shifted from a July and August that was the wettest on record to a fall season that was among the driest on record. And the one common theme throughout there was well above normal temperatures. So we got into the fall, a time of year when you don't anticipate using the term flash drought, but indeed that was probably the best description. We had well above normal temperatures that extended well into November. With the leaves turning and falling, there was a lot of fuel. It was very dry, and fires became a problem throughout much of the southeastern part of the state, where there's much more forest cover. And of course, you've seen in the national media the very tragic fire situation into Tennessee and other areas of the southeast. So this created issues in terms of air quality and health issues for people. Otherwise, for the agricultural sector, the impacts of drought mainly concentrated in terms of pasture land and the livestock producers having to feed hay early to their livestock. Again, some areas of the state had abundant hay yields from earlier in the summer. In other cases, it was too wet to be able to get those yields. But all in all, the impact has been primarily in terms of pastures. Otherwise, conditions were quite favorable, all in all, for agriculture. The warm, dry conditions, however, also did have a negative effect for tobacco farmers that had harvested their tobacco and had it hung in barns to dry, and the heat and the low dew point temperatures caused that drying to happen too quickly in some cases, and that had some negative impact on the quality of the crop. Okay. Now, looking forward, our 7-day quantitative precipitation forecast suggests that our concerns with drought in the southeast and Kentucky are likely to continue to get some relief. We're expecting some significant accumulation of precipitation, very active storm track in the eastern portion of the region, and further accumulation of precipitation in the mountains. So hope to continue to build some snowpack going forward there. Main areas that stand out. The 8 to 14-day outlook calls for an enhanced likelihood of above normal temperatures over most of the region, particularly the eastern portion, with an enhanced likelihood of below normal temperatures in a portion of the Pacific Northwest, extending into part of the north central region in Wyoming and Montana. Precipitation storm pattern that we saw on the previous graphic kind of highlighted there a likelihood that we will be wetter than normal through the Ohio River Valley and parts of the Mississippi Valley, and with enhanced likelihood of drier conditions in the northern plains. So that's going for the period the 22nd through the 28th of December. And then once we get out looking at a month out, the 3 months out, and so forth, of course, we focus on the INSO signal, and we talk about El Nino and La Nina quite a bit. This year it has been La Nina. Is it coming? Is it not coming? and so we're in a La Nina phase right now, and as we'll see, the outlooks recognize that influence on climate. But the probabilistic forecast suggests that it's increasingly likely that we will move back to neutral conditions. In fact, that's the dominant mode as we get into the January, February, March period. And interestingly, again, coming off a very strong El Nino, there was some speculation that we would see the pendulum shift and we would have a strong La Nina. That did not develop, and typically our El Nino, La Nina are most intense as we get into the winter months, and in this case, those conditions are dissipating and again trending back toward normal, and that's the expected mode at this point going forward into next spring and toward next summer. On the right-hand side, you can see some of the plumes from the North American multi-model ensemble, and again, consistent with the graphic on the left, projecting that we'll move back toward a neutral phase from what's turned out to be a very weak La Nina period. Again, you've seen this graphic in the last few months, I think, showing a generalization of La Nina impacts or effects on climate. I would emphasize that this is an idealized pattern. It represents sort of what happens on average, but as we all know, it's very unusual for the weather and climate to be average at any particular point. But nonetheless, we expect wetter conditions throughout parts of the Midwest and colder conditions in the upper plains as being our primary signals. But again, emphasize that there is quite a bit of noise in that signal. The monthly outlook for January, again reflecting a La Nina signal, has an enhanced likelihood of warmer than normal temperatures across the southern tier, along with drier conditions along that area. Most of the Midwest and Great Plains is equal chances. That is, the climate system is not giving us a strong indication that would suggest that we would expect to be above or below normal. And so equal chances, basically a 33% chance of being above normal, near normal, or below normal. And a few exceptions to that, as you can see, with a little bit colder than normal temperatures possible in the northern plains, and a small area of above normal precipitation possible in some of those areas. That would be good for the snowpack out west, and could also influence conditions in the Great Lakes area. The seasonal outlook for the period January through March shows qualitatively a similar pattern in terms of temperature, though the area of above normal temperatures expands. The below normal temperature, again, kicking in there, enhanced likelihood in the northern plains. Precipitation, a larger kind of bullseye coming down into the Ohio River Valley with a slightly enhanced 40% chance of being in that upper tercile in terms of precipitation for that period. And then going a little bit farther out, and of course as we do that, our confidence starts to decline a bit, and we'll see how conditions play out with INSO and such. But projection going into the spring, April through June, that enhanced likelihood of warmer than normal conditions throughout much of the region, with the exception of that northern tier that again has that stronger cold signal from La Nina. And then the wetter than normal conditions still projected into the Great Lakes and Upper Plains area. Okay. So in summary, both temperature and precipitation have averaged near normal region-wide for the month of November, with pockets of above and below normal in some areas. Snowpack is approaching normal conditions following a slow start of the season. Drought conditions in Kentucky are easing, and La Nina conditions are likely to diminish into winter, though climatic conditions may still reflect the La Nina influence. And additional information, there's some links where you can get more details. And some folks, if you have questions, we'll certainly take some time for that now, and you can also follow up later if some other things come to mind going forward. But Doug, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Very good presentation, and we will take questions now. You can either type them in or raise your hand, however you want to try and do that. And we did get one question while we were going along. The question was from Ben Diamond, does the qualitative precipitation forecast differentiate between rain, snow, and any other types of precipitation? And the easy answer to that one, Benjamin, is no. It takes into account all types of precipitation at once. So I don't know if you had a follow-up question to that or not, but if you do, you can raise your hand. I'll take anybody off mute that wants to ask something. So, like Stuart said, the La Nina is diminishing as we speak. The effects of it, however, the atmosphere does take a bit of time to catch up with the ocean, or however you want to look at that. So effects from the situation may linger, through the rest of the winter at least. And Stuart showed, back up just a couple slides, Stuart, to the December through the one more, yeah, or January, February, March. So it may linger a bit longer through at least the winter, the effects. So, got another question from Kevin Grivenow. What is intended use of the soil temperature info? For weather forecasting and runoff is this question. Stuart, you want to talk about that, or do you want Dennis and I? By the way, I should say, just so everybody knows, Dennis Toddy, the ex-South Dakota state climatologist and now USDA Midwest Climate Ag Hub person, is also on to answer questions. Soil temperature.
I'll start on that.
Yeah.
And then I'll let you guys pick up and add some commentary there.
Yep.
But I think first of all, the value of that product varies depending on time of year. Once we get into spring season, of course, farmers are quite interested in those temperatures in terms of planting dates and such. And otherwise, through the cold season, I think at this point we're looking at freezing conditions in soils, and then through time, just the implications perhaps in terms of pests and so forth, things that might survive over winter in warmer soil conditions and such. But I'll let Dennis, Doug, if you want to chime in there with some other detail.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah. Part of a soil temperature is for agricultural issues. One of the less recommended methods, but cheaper methods of applying nitrogen to fields is anhydrous, which goes on in the fall. And you want to do that if you're doing that when your soil temperature is below 50 degrees, because at that point biological activity slows down and you lose less of that nitrogen. You don't stop losing it, but you lose less at that point. When you're above 50 degrees, that nitrogen will be converted to nitrates, I believe, and then you will likely lose that when water moves through the soil. So that's one. You start looking at this from some practical issues of, is the ground frozen at certain levels? Because it can happen further north. You can have a lot of snow on the ground, but if soils were warm before the snow came, you can actually have an issue where you have lots of snow but unfrozen ground underneath it, which for livestock people is a real pain to deal with. That's one of the other issues. And frost, you don't get this out of soil temperature, but frost depth issues do come into play at certain times of the year or in the winter to late spring, if you've had the right conditions where cold can penetrate through the soils.
Yeah, and so just very briefly on the meaning of soil temperatures, they also can help people understand, especially in the sort of water forecasting business, whether water will infiltrate. Once that soil freezes solid, especially in the northern states. There's not going to be a lot of water infiltration. That can be an issue sometimes in the spring when you get rain on top of frozen soils. That kind of thing can lead to flooding and all of that. So there are some implications in terms of recharging soil moisture and all that. Hopefully that answered your question. If not, let us know. We have another question here. Are there any, this is one's for you, definitely, Stuart. Are there any reports of health impacts from the recent wildfires aside from the direct injuries?
Yeah, I don't have detailed information per se, but I was at a meeting recently with somebody from the Kentucky Health Department, and there were some comments about the air quality issues for people elderly and people with asthma and so forth in that region, but I don't have documented statistics in terms of emergency room visits, that sort of thing to go with that.
Obviously, when there is smoke in the air, there are. If you're already in a sort of a jeopardized situation, any kind of particles like that would be detrimental to your health. I think that's pretty easily understood and such. Next question, what is the best guess for snowpack and potential runoff into the Missouri River Basin this winter into spring? And I guess, Stuart, I'll try and deal with that. If the forecasts hold true in terms of greater than normal precipitation and below normal temperatures in the upper basin, and I'm really talking about the really far upper basin in terms of Montana and parts of Wyoming, I would say the situation looks, if those come true, and those are only slight probabilities, by the way, pointing in that direction, I would say that the runoff season should be relatively good. Again, it looks like right now, as of right now, we're a little bit behind the curve in the upper portions of the Missouri and Platte River Basin. So it's really tough to say. We're not very far into the snow accumulation season, especially in the mountains. That can last into May, actually, in some places. So there's a lot of season to go at this point. So I'm speculating on that quite a bit. Our friend, my good friend Kevin Lau from the River Forecast Center, NOAA River Forecast Center out of the Missouri Basin, says the first outlook for that kind of thing will be February 16th, and we probably will be able to discuss that on one of these calls, not in great depth, but to some degree. And let's see, what else do we have here? Any other questions?
Doug, let me throw one more thing. The other thing we have to remember on the snowpack is that we have to watch what happens in part of the area in January in the way of warm temperatures. While you can have, a decent snowpack now, if we were to get something of a warm period, we could melt back some of the snowpack, at least in the plains, earlier on. If you're looking at the mountains, that is not as much of an impact in the mountains, obviously.
Yep. It is early in the season. I'll reiterate that in terms of knowing what the outcome is going to be, because the season is long. So, any other questions or comments? Let me look for hands up or anything here real quick. Don't see any hands up. Don't see any new. Oops. Here's one. Ada Montague from Montana. Just a comment. Oh, okay. She's saying she's very happy to see the climate office in Montana doing the next overview. So, thank you, Ada. Not a question so much. All right. Well, everybody have a great holiday season, and thank you very much, Stuart and Dennis, for the presentation. Stuart, seems like you did a very good job. Seems like most people are saying good presentation and all that kind of stuff. So I hope everybody has a safe holiday season, and we will see you in January. stay tuned. We'll know a little bit more next month. Thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you.